many of these conferences, and one day we'll have him, Tony, you got to get out to Utah to do a conference out there, and then we'll know you've actually really made it. I had the honor, as Tony said, I had the honor of meeting Josh over 10 years ago now. We were the first investor in Omniture, which he co-founded out of a dorm room in 1996, served as CEO. In 2003, Omniture was probably about 30 people. It was fourth place in a very crowded web analytics space, but Josh clearly had a plan, had a best platform, had an intensity that I had never seen before in an entrepreneur and have never seen since, and really he only needed a little bit of rocket fuel. So Omniture became the #1 returning venture investment. Out of over 1,000 venture investments that were done in 2004, it was the #2 performing IPO in 2006. And when the company went public, by the way, Josh was the youngest CEO of any sort of NASDAQ or New York Stock Exchange company, and it became the fastest growing public company from 2006 to 2009, and the largest software acquisition of 2009. It grew at a rate over 8 years of 109%, which is mind-boggling, and had a magic number of very anywhere from 1.5 to 3.3, which Josh will invented, Omniture invented, and I'm sure he'll talk to us about some of the metrics. And so about a little over a year after the acquisition, Josh founded Domo to transform how CEOs and other executives manage their business. And he'll talk about the way that he wanted his to be managed. Domo's built a dream team, a unique product, has over 600 customers now, just in the last year. And in the process, he's created a who's who investor group. And, companies raised $250 million. And UBS recently listed it as a top 10 private data and analytics company. And by the way, it's still stealth with all of that. So maybe you'll talk to us a little bit about that. I'll get to a question in a second, but I did want to say that Josh has been well chronicled and has won many awards. And Fortune magazine earlier this year did an article that is a you don't want to miss article, calling him the wildest, craziest, most death-defying mogul on the planet. And I personally have seen him do some amazing things like jumping off buildings, racing cars, cliff diving in Lake Powell, once putting a suit over an IV bag and raising $125 million. And by the way, giving the ad tech keynote in Japan in Japanese, with all the Americans in the audience scrambling to put their translators on to basically hear the English. I don't think that's ever been done before, or will ever be done probably again unless Josh does it. He's one of the most generous people I've ever met, tenaciously loyal to his friends, has 6 daughters, and family is always first with Josh. So, Josh, let's talk about analytics. You've been doing this now for 18 years, really over 3 decades, and you've seen huge changes in how analytics and data-driven companies are built. So let's talk first about Omniture, about what were the dynamics of building it in terms of use of data and analytics, and then maybe we can transition to how that's all changed over the last 10 years.
Yeah, with Omniture, the thing that was really compelling is everyone was out spending money on the internet, making websites, and up until then, everything that was ever done for advertising or marketers was something that was printed. And so you were making these month-long or quarter-long decisions every time you made any decision about what you were going to use for your copy or for your media. And when the internet came along, all of a sudden you had the ability to change it every hour if you wanted to. And so there was a need for data to tell you how it was performing. And I remember we'd go and we'd make these websites, and we charge someone $250,000 for a website, and they'd say, well, what happened? Did I get any traffic? And so we would try to install software that existed, and all the software was really slow and cumbersome, and anytime someone's traffic would double because they'd get mentioned in USA Today, then their whole everything would crash. And to get the data back about 5-6 days later. And so we invented a way to be able to manage all of that data in the cloud before the cloud existed, before on-demand software existed, and it was just called remotely hosted software. And But really, the crux of it was just trying to be able to enable managers and executives to understand what was going on with the business. And the quicker we gave them the data, the faster they were able to digest it, the faster they were able to make changes to the business.
So when Omniture made the transition to go with web analytics, people were looking at maybe reports once a day.
Yeah.
And then there was this magic time, wasn't it around 2004, 2005, where it all switched? Walmart started doing A/B tests.
Yep.
Real time took over.
Yeah, and I think it's the Jeffrey Moore's book, Crossing the Chasm. I mean, first time I read that book, I felt like I was born again. I finally found my religion, because I'm like, all these things are happening to us. And when you see, when you think about the early adopters, we had early adopters, and then all of a sudden the masses came, and it went from why in the world would I want that in real time to, well, no one runs a business without real-time analytics. And that shift happened dramatically and quickly, and it took a while for it to finally happen, but once it happened, and everyone came en masse. And I think we're seeing the same thing now. I mean, there was about two years ago, I was talking to a CFO of a bank, top 25 bank, and he said, why do I need data more than once a quarter? And I honestly was in front of the whole executive team. I started laughing in front of his whole executive team because I thought he was joking. Come to find out he wasn't joking, and trying to backtrack out of that was a little uncomfortable. But I just couldn't believe what he was saying. And he was being serious, and he was part of the old guard. And as soon as we walk out of the room, a bunch of his people come up to us, and they're like, you know what, we still want to buy the product, because if we could get loan rates of our competition and how they're changing in real time, it saves us millions of dollars, because we usually don't find out until the next day, and there's days where everyone will change up or change down, and we're left either losing money because we're not able to close loans because the rates are too high, or losing money because everyone's dropped their rates and we haven't, and we're still, we're losing business that way. So it was, I think that shift is definitely taking place. People understand that they need real-time data now.
So Omniture moved into that area. You had, by the time the company was acquired, you were doing well over 1 trillion transactions a quarter. The prospectus itself, right on the cover, showed 12 different data sources being, the whole idea of data fusion was happening then. But now we're like data fusion on steroids. How is it different now with the creation of Domo?
Yeah, so we started Domo. We've got over 600 customers. We're growing faster than Omniture ever grew. We're growing faster than I've ever seen or heard of any B2B company grow, ever. And it's really fun. But what's interesting is why people buy the products. You want them to buy because they're combining their sales expense data with their sales fulfillment data and attainment data, in conjunction with maybe some customer information that you have, in conjunction with some HR information, and you think you put together a report and it'd be like this holy grail of information. That's not what they're doing. They're just so excited to get their data out of a spreadsheet and out of their inbox into something that's in the cloud, on their mobile phone, and they have alerts, and they get fed the information, it gets pushed to them when it changes. That's so exciting to executives. And it's really fun to be a part of, because you go and you sit down for 15 years in Omniture, I tried to get in front of the CMO. And we finally, the last year, started getting in front of some CMOs. Whereas here, one of the top 5 media companies, we've been working with them for about 5 months. And we go in there, the first product they bought from us was only about $50,000, $50,000 a year. So it's really easy anning, right? A lot of people can get that purchase approved. And then 5 months later, we're in there, and our champion, internal champion, is demoing our product to the CMO, the CEO, the CFO, the COO, the CTO, and they get done with the demo, and the CEO of that division said, I'm taking this to the CEO of the mothership. It's a Fortune 50 company. And then that demo takes place, and then we get a phone call back, and we get a $500,000 upsell per year. And we're still 5% penetrated in the organization, the way that we will be over time. So it's really fun to see how starved everyone is for just getting information on your phone. Right? It's hard to even have a directory of where your people, other people you work with and DSOs are, or how many receivables you were able to collect on. Like that information, getting that in real time, it all exists, it all lives real time. No one gets it. When you give it to them, it blows their mind. And then after you blow their mind and they're like, okay, now the lights are on, they're never getting rid of that, then they start taking those next steps and getting more mature in the way they use the data.
So far more strategic. I mean, I think Domo's the first company that I've seen that started to target the CEO,
Yeah.
even as the buyer of the product. And so that big shift from selling basically to somebody deep in the bowels of the organization all the way up to the CEO, combination of Domo's product set and what you're doing, but also I assume the strategic nature of how people are starting to view data today.
Right.
So we have some questions queued up for those of you to wake you up here this morning. And I think, Ben, you want to, where's Yo Ben? You want to queue up the first one? This is on, so one title that is starting to penetrate the organization is the Chief Data Officer. And so we were going to ask the audience, do we have that up? Okay. So there we go. So a lot of people have been talking about the Chief Data Officer, and this is your opportunity to use your device in front of you and to tell us what percent of Fortune 500 companies will have a Chief Data Officer, or Chief Analytics Officer, I guess we're starting to see that title too, by the end of 2015. Oh, so they're moving around here. Okay, so is this settling in? Okay, so Josh, 50% of the audience is saying, oh, it's still moving around. Okay, well, we'll let that move a little bit. So tell us, what are you seeing in that regard? Are you seeing Chief Data Officers starting in companies?
Yeah, and it's it's one of those things where you've had BI for so long. I remember sitting down with a Fortune 5 company, and they said, we have every BI product that's ever been made. We have more data than any company. We're really proud of that fact. We collect about 83% of the data that we want to collect. That's really 83%, and that's the best that you think exists in the entire world. And I think there's there's definitely an acceptance of kind of almost failure when it comes to BI. And so when you go and you take a Chief Data Officer, a Chief Analytics Officer, I don't think that's a bad idea necessarily. Usually I don't like these things that are kind of in vogue. But the fact that you're putting so much focus on the data and getting the data and making sure that it's accurate and making sure that it's distributed, and you have someone that's responsible for it, that's working for the CEO, the president of the company, I think that's actually a pretty good thing because often what we'll see is we'll talk to a company where they say, well, we're working on a big data warehouse project for the next 18 months, and then we want to get back to you. Or we're not sure if this data is accurate, so we need to go and clean it before we start distributing that information. And that's kind of really old school. We'll wait till we print it, and once we print it, then we'll look at it, and we might make changes to it. But our next cycle for printing is not for 6 more months. And what we've always seen is just get the data in everyone's hands, and then if it's important data, you're making critical decisions based on it, then we will get so much sunlight shown on that data, and that will become the disinfectant to make sure that it's actually accurate. So we've seen that getting that data in people's hands definitely is the best way to move forward, move the organization forward rapidly.
So our audience poll is in. So 54% said about 25% of corporations will be penetrated with Fortune 500 and Chief Data Officer by the end of next year, and 32% said 50%, and that's pretty much what we're hearing. Gartner is saying 25% next year. Russell Reynolds, which is doing a lot of recruiting in this area, is saying 50%. They're saying very fast uptake, and Gartner already talks about over 100 enterprises that have Chief Data Officers in place. How are you seeing this by industry? Or maybe we should pull up another. Why don't we pull up our next poll? Ben, you want to bring the next one up? So before we do that, Josh, what are you seeing in terms of a large part of what Domo is doing is bringing this data in very quickly. You've created a very interesting pipeline to be able to do, and one of the metrics you're using is to try to do in seconds what used to take hours or maybe even days to fuse this data together.
Right.
How are you seeing that happen, and how important was that to?
Yeah, it's more dramatic than that. I mean, we have a bunch of customers. They say that they were getting something once a quarter, and now they're getting it in real time. So it's a dramatic departure from what they're used to. Countless executives have said something to me like, "I've been trained my whole career not to ask these questions, and now we're getting this information in real time." So it's really fun to get that in people's hands, and then it's also fun to see what they do with it afterwards. In terms of industries, I disagree with the poll the way it's trending so far.
Oh, you can see it? Oh, it's down there. Okay, yeah, go ahead.
Because at Omniture, we had every single industry, but the ones that were biggest were media and e-commerce. And it was mostly because they were the ones that were the most advertising driven online. And data is interesting to someone if they've got something to lose or they've got something to make. And so when you look at like financial, for instance, when you look at media and entertainment, we have customers that are looking at their data and they're looking at their television channel and the audience, and they're looking at the competitor's audience in real time and changing their broadcast in real time based on what the other folks are showing, because they can real time see people moving to the other networks because of the stories they're covering, and then their producers are going to change their stories. So I mean, I don't think it's going to be held in any one particular industry. Every single industry makes money, and the fact that they're all making money means that there's data there that can help them figure out how to play different levels and make more.
So what I find fascinating about this poll, about what you just said, is that in the 90s, I remember when the CRM industry started and basically when web analytics started, and all the early customers were high tech. People were selling to their own, evangelizing to the group that seemed to understand how to work with the products. This poll shows high tech as the lowest penetrated of that, or at least people are talking about, e-commerce, healthcare, media, entertainment, as you're saying, financial, pretty much across the board. Financial services was always the laggard, and now it seems like the CFO can't get enough of analytics.
Yep. Well, and then the one that's not on here is, the big iron, the manufacturing, consumer products, consumer goods. Where there's billion-dollar industries, they pull the lever just a little teeny bit, and it makes tens of millions of dollars. Those are the ones that we're finding to be pretty fascinating, because we're working with a large food manufacturer, and they're able to. They literally were getting information once a quarter, and all their lines are billion-dollar lines, and now they're getting that information in real time, and and it's fun to see our customers get promoted very rapidly, because their executives are going into meetings, they're pulling out their phone, they're pulling out their iPad, and they're sitting there with real-time information, and everybody in the room wants it. And so that's the other thing that's been really fun, is to see how fast and how rapidly it spreads.
So you're spending a lot of time perfecting the user interface. Probably more time at Domo than companies did in the last decade.
For sure.
How do you view all that? Is that helping you get to these other industries quicker?
Yeah, I mean, for us, the focus has always been on the executives and the managers of an organization. And when I go look at something, I run a technology company, but I'm not a technologist, and I don't really want to become one. And I purposely, try to remain somewhere close to maybe the average, because I think that gives you better insights into what your customers are going to be like. And the vast majority of people out there that run businesses are not technologists. The vast majority of managers out there are not technologists. So trying to create an interface that is similar to an experience that they are used to using, whether it's on Yelp or Facebook or Twitter or their iTunes, whatever consumers are using, we try to make our product feel like it's that easy to use and that friendly. And then you have to bury the power in there, because if you don't have the power users, then inevitably you'll lose some deals in the RFP process, because they definitely swing big bats. But trying to find that balance is extremely important nowadays, I believe.
And you build specific KPIs, key performance indicators for all these industries. How many KPIs is Domo up to?
Tens of thousands of KPIs for a variety of industries.
So people can really drill down really deep into the depths of the information they're trying to look at.
Yeah, and it's interesting also that in web analytics we saw, if you were back in early 2000, if you were in a marketing organization and you knew how to use data to run any part of your business, you were the expert in that entire organization, and you were going to get promoted very rapidly because you had proof that the CMO should give you more money because you knew exactly what the return was going to be. And then that started spreading to the organization as people were rapidly promoted. And we're seeing the same thing now. You go to any part of the organization, there's someone that's running their business based on data. You still have to interpret it, you still have to infer, but if you have information and you can go and run a test, and then you go back to your boss and say, look what I just did, we're seeing those same people, in this time around, they're getting promoted very rapidly. So data is definitely something that's worthwhile grabbing onto, if you're somewhere in an organization.
So you created beyond the companies themselves, you've created a couple of institutions that have far larger legs than any company could have. One of them is CEO.com, and the other one is Silicon Slopes. Let's talk about CEO.com first. What was your vision for that? It's an amazing website of information, interviews, core information, original surveys, information. What's your vision for CEO.com?
So CEO.com was, when I was an amateur, we were always trying to get to the CMO, so I started CMA.com there and just kind of took a page from the last playbook, and it's a good way to generate leads. And there's not really an audience, there's not really very many locations that are targeted just for CEOs. And so that was the original intention. And when you look at the leads that we've been getting from it, it's paid for itself many times over, which has been great. So it's just another marketing vehicle, really is what it is, shrouded in a cool domain name.
It's come up with some really interesting information on the surveys. I found out in a recent survey interview, I think, over 1,000 CEOs, that 46% of the people in their organization massage the data before the CEO actually sees it.
Right.
It showed that 57% of CEOs are using their mobile phone to get information. So you're getting some.
Yeah, no, there's real utility to it, and that's, we have to make it unique and different, or it doesn't. If there's not utility, then people aren't going to come and we don't get the leads. But you just ask why it is. So.
There we go. There we go. And it's a URL you will always remember. The recent one I would also talk about great leaders. You blogged about this the last few days, right? You said great leaders ace this one skill. You talked a lot about communications.
Right.
You want to tell us a little bit about that, what you've seen?
Well, I think just talking about how you manage an organization, it seems like it's one of the things that's most often lacking for people that are really capable and talented is they don't spend the extra time either communicating or, it's funny, every once in a while you'll have a day at the office and you're like, this feels like freaking high school because, people's feelings get hurt and someone said something to upset somebody else and someone's empire building over in a different department, and a lot of times you can fix it by just sitting down and talking to people, and sometimes it does feel like high school, but we're all those same people, and when you ignore the people are people, then I think you sometimes come into problems. And I've always had high-performing organizations. I've always had organizations where everyone knows there's no BS. Sometimes we get mistaken for how much fun we have, that maybe we're not as serious as we really are, but people that are there all know that you do your job first, and then when if you're doing your job, then you have to screw around as much as you possibly can and have a good time. But you can't ever forget just how important it is to just help everyone understand where they're at, how valuable they really are, how valuable they're going to be, how their place in the organization is going to evolve over time. And just that really straightforward communication, that honesty, I've noticed over the years that's brought a lot of loyalty, and that's why I've had most of my executives work with me at Omniture. I think I only had one leave, and a lot of them followed me over to Domo. I haven't had anybody on the executive ranks leave Domo either, so I think they might not like what I'm saying to them, but they know it's always going to be honest and straightforward, and they know I care about them. And they won't know that you care about them unless you take the time and you invest, early on when they don't need it. So they know that you actually care about them as a person, you care about them, you care about their family. And once you've done that and you've laid that groundwork, you made that investment, then when it hits the fan and they are upset about something that you said that maybe was misinterpreted, they take you at face value because you made that investment. So I do think that's a really important part of running an organization.
Well, the culture at both Omniture and Domo have been just incredible. Ben, You want to key up the last question? So Silicon Slopes. Silicon Slopes, when did you start it? How has it progressed through? What do you think?
So Silicon Slopes, the governor would always call up the tech companies, and we'd go up there, all these CEOs would go up to do some kind of, off-site, let's talk about how we can make Utah better. And I'd always go because, it's, when I first started my first company, Utah was known for like multi-level marketing companies and obviously lots of wives and bad drinking laws and let's see what else. What else, guys? What? John Stockton. He's not there anymore. So we were trying to figure out what else we'd be known for besides reverse mergers, Reg D 504s. And we had this great technology center that was going on because of Novell and WordPerfect. It's the youngest population in the country. It's the most highly educated population in the country. It's got a great work-life balance, very low cost of living, and we were just trying to figure out what to. And we always got stuck in the very first question, what should we brand it? And everyone would argue about it. And after like the fourth meeting I went to like that over 5 years, I said, screw it, we're just gonna do it ourselves. So I got some people in my company, we sat down, we brainstormed extremely efficiently, put it on the whiteboard, circled it, named it, that was that. And then just invited everyone to participate. And so a lot of companies now, you'll see in their press releases, they won't say American Fork or Lehigh or all these new towns that are out there, they'll say Silicon Slopes, Utah. And it has been a big help with just helping people understand that there's a tech center. And sometimes people will roll their eyes and be like, oh, another Silicon this or Silicon that. I'm like, I don't care what you think. The fact is that people are talking about it. People do recognize that at one point last year, or this year, there was 10 companies that raised money over $100 million, and 2 of them were in Utah. So there's a lot going on in Utah. There's a ton of high-tech companies. There's a bunch of companies getting ready to go public, and it just helps people understand that there's a center there, and birds of a feather. So the network effect.
And the best kept secret is out.
There it is.
There you go. And you're right, by the way. So the setup question, which maybe the answer should have been obvious for those of you with clickers, right? Is which area was the number one job growth? Last year, according to the Millikan Institute, and that's correct. The Provo Orem had a larger job growth than both San Francisco and Silicon Valley in terms, and more impressively, of the top 5 centers for growth in the country last year, Salt Lake City and Provo were each 2 of the top 5. And I think that's quite a testimonial to the area. And I would argue that between the work that Josh did to start and create Omniture, now over $1 billion division of Adobe, Domo, Inside Sales, Qualtrics, what Intermountain Health is doing, the NSA coming in the data center, I would argue that Salt Lake City, Provo, and the Silicon Slopes is actually now the analytics center of the country. So maybe with that we will come to a close. So, Tony, you're going to take us off the stage, I assume, anyway.
But thank you very much. It's great.